along efficiently. As always, I call this order of the Education Policy Committee to order. I'll take up the following items for approval. Action item 1A, approval of the minutes of November 20, 2023. I move approval of action item 1A. Is there a second? Is there any discussion, any amendments to that? Hearing none. We'll proceed to a vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. That's approved. The policy items. Policy item 1B is a resolution to amend the bylaws of the Graduate Council of the Graduate School of University and University Center. I now call on Executive Vice Chancellor, University Provost Wendy Hensel, to provide further background on this item.
Thank you, Trustee Berger. Due to persistent and ongoing difficulty in obtaining a quorum of voting student and faculty representatives at the Graduate Center's Graduate Council governance meetings, the Graduate Council proposed reducing the number of its voting representatives and allowing duly elected alternate student and faculty members to count towards quorum and vote if a program's primary voting representative is unable to be present at the governance meeting. Should the committee have questions about the amendments to the Graduate Council bylaws, my colleague Josh Brumberg, Interim President of the Graduate Center, is here today to answer any questions.
Thank you, Provost. I move approval of item 1B1A. Do I have a second? Thank you. Is there any discussion or any questions? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor? Any opposed, please? Hearing none, this matter is approved. Policy item 1B1B is a resolution to amend the CUNY School of Professional Studies governance plan. I again call on EVC Hensel to present.
Minor revisions were proposed to the SPS governance plan to 1, delete the reference to the position of a Senior Associate Dean of Strategy and Innovation, since the school has eliminated that position, and 2, to reflect that the Director of Academic Affairs has assumed responsibility for taking and keeping the minutes of the school-wide Personnel Committee meetings. SPS Dean Lisa Braverman is here to answer any questions that you may have.
I move the approval of item 1B1B. Do I have a second? Second. Any discussion or any questions? Seeing none, may we proceed to a vote? All those in favor? All opposed? Any abstentions? That matter is approved. Policy item 1B2A is a resolution to expand optional submission of standardized test scores requirement for undergraduate admissions. Again, I call on Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost Hensel to provide further background, and that will include a presentation that was originally in our materials as an information item, but applies directly to this item, so we're going to do it all right now. Provost?
Academic access and excellence are at the core of the university's mission to provide opportunities that lift all citizens of New York City. In January 2022, this board adopted a pilot to examine the effect of making standardized tests optional in undergraduate admissions, in part as a response to the challenges of the pandemic. The pilot expires in spring 2025, and we now seek to extend the pilot to include fall 2025 through spring 2027 application cycles to secure data post-pandemic and ensure that any change is consistent with the university's high academic standards, student access, and achievement. As the committee considers an extension of the policy, we thought it would be useful to provide additional information on this topic. Assistant Dean for Policy Research, Sarah Trolsch, supported by Interim Senior University Dean of Graduate and Undergraduate Programming, Ann Lopes, will share a presentation about the role of standardized tests in CUNY admissions, as well as initial observations about the impact of our test optional policy. Sarah?
All right, thank you so much, EVC Hensel. So our goal today is to report on the state of what we know so far about how the previous board actions have played out, and to give you some context for the larger movements around test optional admissions and admissions within CUNY, and to share some of the complexities of this situation that motivate us to ask for 2 more years of this pilot. So as we've explained, previously the board voted to suspend any collection of SAT and ACT scores first for the 21-22 academic year, then for 22-23. We have just, for fall 2023, had our very first term of SAT optional admissions for the first time in CUNY's history. That is the policy that we're asking to extend for 2 more years. So what we knew going into this time period. CUNY has done extensive research on how SATs, as well as other factors that are collected as part of freshman admissions, predict performance and things that we care about in the university environment. And we have consistently found that SAT scores have a predictive relationship with first-year grades, with retention, with eventual graduation at CUNY. Though we've also repeatedly found in all of those cases that the predictive role of SATs is smaller than that of high school grades or other combinations of academic factors that we could look at. We also know that the SATs have had an important role in the admissions process as a sorting mechanism. While the SATs are not the most influential or predictive part of a student's application, they have been an easy way for our colleges to make decisions about who to admit and not to admit. When that ease of referring to the SAT has gone away, that's certainly changed the role and the job that our colleges have had to do in making admissions decisions for students. We have also known for some time that our Black and Hispanic freshmen and applicants are worse presented on the higher end distributions of SAT scores than they are on high school grades or on other types of standardized tests like New York State Regents exams. And that underrepresentation of Black and Hispanic applicants at the highest quintiles of the SAT distribution has been one of the concerns that many people thinking about CUNY's admissions process have had going into this recent environment and the disruption in the availability of scores. So for fall 2023, again, this is our first term in which SATs have been optional as part of the admissions process for bachelor's programs. 5% of applicants submitted SAT scores. This is much, much less than we used to have when SATs were mandatory for almost all admissions to bachelor's programs. So back in 2019, when SAT or ACT scores were still mandatory for the vast majority of bachelor's admissions, well over 70% of all applicants to CUNY submitted SAT scores, and nearly all students who were actually admitted to our bachelor's programs did. So in practice, for fall 2023, SATs continue to play almost no role in actual admissions decisions for colleges. One of the things we're looking forward to for the future is to see if the rates at which applicants submit SAT scores change. We know that students are coming off of a great deal of disruption. Most other colleges in the country continue to be SAT optional as there's more normalcy in students' high school experiences and access to test taking and access to preparation for test taking. We're wondering if we'll see increasing numbers of students submitting scores in the future. So that's one of the things that would be very useful for us to capture more information on. What we also see so far is of the small number of students who submitted SAT scores, they were overwhelmingly applicants to our honors colleges and therefore much better academically prepared on a range of different measures than our average applicant. And so there's little that we can stay extrapolating from the very highly selected population of students who chose to submit SATs for this particular term that might apply to the larger population. So in the absence of these availability of standardized tests, our schools have had to have more emphasis on high school grades and a careful reading of the high school transcripts. Now, this unfortunately is also an area in which there's been a fair amount of disruption in the last couple of years. So this table presents trends in the mean high school grade point average of CUNY's freshmen, divided by associate freshmen, bachelor's freshmen, and then the total. Just looking at the total column on the far right, you can see that for many years, from 2015 through 2019, the mean average high school GPA of our freshmen was right around an 80, with small amounts of variation. Since 2020, we have seen that GPA go up, now to 83, which is a fairly substantial change. You can also see that looking at that middle panel showing the trends in the mean GPA of bachelor's freshmen in particular, that the mean GPA of students admitted and enrolled in CUNY's bachelor's programs has gone up from an 86 to an 87, nearly an 88, at the same time that you can see the total number of students enrolled in our programs have increased by nearly 50%. So that's going from 12,755 bachelor's freshmen to 18,863 in just this 9-year period of time. So that kind of growth in the size of the freshman class, while the GPA is staying relatively high or growing, brings into question the meaning of these GPAs going forward. Unfortunately, without the presence of the standardized tests, it's harder for us to know if these represent real increases in students' preparation coming out of high school that's fairly captured in the GPAs, or whether they represent some potential grade inflation or the results of more lenient grading policies that the high schools were forced to adopt during the pandemic. But with the information that our colleges have had, they have seen strong or increasing GPA profiles for their admitted students. And they've also been admitting larger numbers of students over time. So between 2019 and 2023, nearly all of the colleges that admit exclusively bachelor's freshmen saw increases in their admissions rates. 2 colleges saw increases of nearly 20 percentage points in this 5-year period. A few others saw 7, 8, 9 percentage point increases. So our colleges have increased their admissions rates over time. This is a phenomenon that started before the disruptions of the pandemic and is not exclusive to the changes we made in the SAT, but the changes we made in the way that we collect the SAT have certainly helped accelerate some trends that we saw brewing before then. And specifically, this is the change in the number of our freshmen who are enrolling directly in our senior colleges versus in our community colleges. So this chart shows the number of freshmen enrolled in CUNY senior colleges, represented by the blue bar at the top, compared to the number enrolled in CUNY's community colleges, represented by the orange line beneath it. And what you can see is from 2014, 2015, 2016, there was relatively equal enrollment. About half of our freshmen were in community colleges, about half were in senior colleges. That started to diverge in 2016, again, several years before the pandemic or any of our changes in SAT collection policy, where we saw relatively small declines at first in community colleges and growth in our senior college enrollment. And then between 2019 and 2020, when we had the onset of the pandemic, there was a steep decline in freshman enrollment in community colleges, where our senior colleges overall continued to grow. So we've gone from a system in 2014 when 48% of CUNY's freshmen were in senior colleges to now 62% of our freshmen enrolling directly in our senior colleges. So there has been a substantial shift over time that, again, predates the changes we made in SAT collection, but the changes in SAT collection have probably accelerated some of the trends that we saw before then. And turning to look at what we've seen in terms of academic outcomes, of course, we all understand that our academic outcomes have been complicated not just by admissions changes, but by the academic experiences our students have had in classrooms and the disruptions of the pandemic. What these charts show is the percentage of students hitting some of our key academic milestones for freshmen in their first year. The chart on the left shows the percentage of students who have earned 30 credits or more in their first year. The gray line at the top shows the percentage of our baccalaureate cohort who have met that benchmark. The green line at the bottom shows the percentage of the associate cohort who has met those important milestones. And the blue line in the middle shows the average or the total across the baccalaureate and associate programs. Just looking at the gray line that represents the percentage of our baccalaureate freshmen who have hit the milestone of earning 30 credits, you can see that there has been a decline since the onset of the pandemic beginning in 2020, from over 50% of the cohorts hitting that important milestone to 43 or 44%. But what's very interesting is that if we look at the university total, represented by the blue line in the middle, that number is nearly flat. So we've gone from about 30% of all of our freshmen to just down to 29% of our freshmen. There's a lot that could be going on there, but what this might be is consistent with that shift we've seen of students from the community colleges and associate programs into the baccalaureate programs. So some of what we might be seeing is that students who would have been among the highest performing or best qualified at our associate level are now entering our baccalaureate programs. That might be contributing to lower overall completion of important milestones and metrics at the baccalaureate level, but not necessarily different from what would have happened if the students had been at the community colleges, represented by the fact that our university totals there are nearly flat. And we see a version of the same phenomenon also looking at the percentage of our freshmen who have earned Gateway credit in English, which is just another typical freshman academic performance metric that we look at. Again, you can see the gray bar represented by baccalaureate students shows a decline from nearly 90% of our baccalaureate freshmen hitting that benchmark pre-pandemic to now like 84 to 85% of freshmen hitting that important metric. But if we look at the university totals represented by the blue line, again, they're much closer to flat than the baccalaureate-only levels are. So it's possible that students are experiencing continued disruptions from the pandemic. It's also possible that the shift we've seen of students out of our community colleges into our baccalaureate programs is showing up in some of the metrics for our freshman cohorts that we're simply seeing slightly different students in our bachelor's programs than we were beforehand. So many different things going on here in terms of how we're admitting students, trends that predated the pandemic, trends that predated our SAT policies. There's lots of different implications for OAA Central and for the individual colleges that involve admissions, but in addition to admissions, the support services for admitted students, and some thinking about potential balancing of the roles of our community colleges versus senior colleges, and which different types of colleges should be admitting types of students, especially as their first freshman experience. So those are the questions that we're beginning to explore across OAA.
Thank you. Having heard that, I'm going to move the approval of policy item 1B2A. Do I have a second? Are there any questions, discussion, answers, since we have somebody here? Yes, Trustee Versani.
So there's a big shift in populations from associate to baccalaureate. Baccalaureate students have better success rate, and so the overall success rate has gone up. That's clear. It's even more clear when you look at the mean GPA, because you saw even a more dramatic shift than you did in the graph that you showed with shifting enrollments. So that's all great. That's understandable. I don't really understand where the SAT fits into this. I mean, we're trying to collect more data on high school performance. We've got data on freshman success in math that you've shared with us at the UFS. Can you give us a sense of where the university appears to be trending on this? I mean, I don't even know which campuses were using SAT primarily as an entrance, or it had been used somewhat as placement, but that was a long time ago. I don't know if that's still the case. So,
yep. And so I've got my colleague Sharon Hardy here, Interim Executive Director of Admissions. I might ask you to speak to the use of the SAT, Sharon. That's okay.
Sure. So
Please use the microphone.
absolutely, sure. So the SAT was used as part of the criteria for entry into a bachelor's degree program, that it was required for any applicant who wished to pursue study at one of our four-year colleges in a bachelor's degree.
And that's sort of the submission of the SAT, but CUNY did not have a minimum SAT standard that was across the university. Each college had its own combination of GPA and SAT, and my sense is that for the colleges, there was generally a sort of mix and match approach where higher SATs could substitute for lower GPAs sort of for the holistic assessment of an applicant. But previous to these resolutions, all of the bachelor's programs required students to, at a minimum, submit an SAT, and the SAT was one of the factors used in the admissions decision. So to the excellent question of where does the SAT fit within sort of all the things that we presented, that is one of the things we're continuing to ask about, that clearly there are these trends and greater admission rates to our senior colleges that began before we made any changes in the SAT. And I think part of what we're trying to do is figure out what is the package of things that colleges ought to be looking at, and what role should the SAT play, if any, within the sort of the combinations of holistic admissions that our campuses are doing. I think it's very possible for our schools to be admitting comparable classes without the reliance on the SAT they previously had, but I think there are some open questions about how quickly the admissions rates have changed and where they are now relative to where we might want them to be in the future.
And if I can just add one thing, you may be wondering, just to sort of put the cherry on the top of why are we bringing all this information to you. In part, we want to make a very thoughtful decision of whether it affects academic quality, how does it route people into community colleges versus senior colleges, and we have not had an entire cohort of data of post-COVID. And so we have all of these effects, but insufficient ways to tease them out to identify, is that the SAT? Is that the pandemic? Is it some type of combination of both? So the recommendation is, because we have to go so far in advance, that we need a little bit more time to gather data to really give you a good answer to the question of how does the SAT affect our admissions and academic performance?
Councilor Rosati Moore?
Yeah, I have one more question. First off, a comment. First off, I want to thank you for highlighting the impact of decisions that are made at committees like this and how the students shift throughout the university. I will point to the graph on enrollment and say that started with decisions made by the Chancery regarding remediation and proficiency status in 2017. For good or bad, these decisions have an impact, and the community colleges are paying the price for it, but that's not really my question, that's my comment. My question is, externally, does not having SAT help us with any kind of ranking system? I don't know that any campuses, maybe say Baruch, put out their median SAT scores as part of their highlighting of students, but does it impact the university at all to not do this?
I'm not aware of any formal ranking system that relies solely on the SAT. When I think of examples such as U.S. News and World Report, as part of the criteria, there's multiple things and not just the SAT. And it has been more of a national trend to move away from required test.
Yeah, I think very much another piece of information we're hoping to gather is not just the performance of our own students, but the general landscape. So I think as people will know, the vast majority of selective colleges became SAT optional during the pandemic. Most of them have extended those SAT optional policies through this year into the next 1 to 2 years. So the competitive landscape of who else is requiring the SAT will have, I think, very important implications for CUNY's recruitment and admissions. It will also have implications for students' SAT taking behavior. So one of the things we're trying to gather more information on is what's our competitive landscape going to look like? And we think what we'll see is a lot of responses in the rankings in U.S. News. Those will follow the kind of actions that the colleges choose to take about how SAT optional they are, or who is going to drop collecting the SAT altogether.
Further?
Yeah, thank you. I very much appreciate this presentation, and I guess I sort of had a longer view question. I understand the interest in gathering more data, but as you're looking at the package, I'd like to know a little bit more about sort of what your Gestalt thinking is about what the outcomes are. Specifically, is the scenario that you're thinking about, is it really a reinstate SATs versus not, or is it can the data shed some light on what the array of services are we need to either mitigate against some of the data that the SAT could, and to ensure student success? And, without a crystal ball, but do you really see any foreseeable future in which an SAT is going to be back to being a requirement, or are you looking at trying to flesh out a more holistic, to use that word, package of support for students?
Well, I'll start and you all can join in. I think it's an important question of academic quality. I mean, we have to start there, right? And make sure that we're not doing a disservice to our students by not requiring it. If what we saw is that we are channeling them into the wrong place because we don't have enough rail, for example, if we're putting them in, our strongest students in the community colleges are matriculating into the senior colleges as a result of not having that, you start to have the resource question of how many remedial classes do you have in how many different settings, and those kind of questions. So I think it's a very real question. on academic quality, but ultimately what we mostly care about is, are we meeting the students' needs where they're being placed? And unlike many states, we have additional ways to identify performance. We have the Regents exams, and Sarah can talk a little bit about that. But I would really say it's all of those things, and just an unwillingness to really, in the environment of the pandemic data, to make a conclusive determination.
Yeah, I would just say, I think there are, there's many different routes that this could take. I think going back to requiring the SAT for all applicants is probably the least likely of them. Right now, we have a policy where students, there are no incentives to submit an SAT, so one of the things we could explore in the future is some degree of incentive or encouragement. So right now, we have absolutely no encouragement. We could change some of the messaging around that. We could change some types of consideration. The question of placement into special programs or special classes came up. So there's a wide range of things between what we've done in the past and what we're doing currently that I think we could explore. And I think this is also something where we're looking to see how the larger landscape of admissions evolves, again, with our competitor colleges, if we're looking to see things like other types of incentives, for example.
I mean, I'll add two things. A, the provost mentioned the regions, right? And that's, as we know, is a conversation that the state is having about maybe that landscape also changing. So I think that what you see here is a very thorough, comprehensive presentation by the provost and the team on all the different things that we'd like the trustees to have available to you as we think about what's next, and actually saying that we don't feel that we have that many of those things with a level of more certainty. So wanted to provide that for the trustees and also get a sense from you as to that might there be other things that you want us to look at as we continue to do this inquiry.
I don't see the SATs as a negative. I see it as a guide to help to have a student have a successful experience at CUNY. So I think, in my view at least, it would be a combination of things. But I would not say that the SAT should be something that would disqualify, but it's something to guide so that we can help those potential students to achieve success at CUNY.
I imagine as you collect more and more data going forward, we'll continue this discussion on a periodic basis.
Absolutely, and if you, just point of order, I guess it's not a point of order. If you allow me to just say, we are so fortunate to have Sarah and Sharon as part of our team. The data, they are some of the most sophisticated data analysts that in the country, and we really benefit from that. So we'll be happy to continue to report back.
Thank you. Anything further?
Question. Does this have any implication on our international student population and admissions, or no implications?
International students are required to take the TOEFL exam if they're not, if their language of instruction was not in English, but otherwise it's no impact in terms of standardized testing.
Anything further? Seeing none, we shall proceed to a vote. All in favor of approving policy item 1B2A, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Right?
Any against, say nay. Any abstentions? This matter is approved. Thank you very much for the presentation. Policy item 1B2B is a resolution to amend the university policy regarding the disposition of allegations of research misconduct. I ask University Provost Hensel to present on this item.
Each institution that applies for or receives public health service support for biomedical or behavioral research, research training, or activities relating to that research must comply with the public health service policies on research misconduct, including having written policies and procedures for addressing allegations of misconduct. The proposed revisions to CUNY Board Policy 1.24, Section 9.2, adds appropriate interim institutional actions to protect public health, sponsor funds and equipment, and the integrity of the research process. It's intended to ensure compliance with 42 CFR Part 93 as required by the Office of Research Integrity of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Should the committee have any questions about this action, Rosemarie Wesson, Associate Vice Chancellor for Research, and Linda Mules, University Executive Director for Research Integrity and Compliance, are here to answer any questions.
Thank you. I move the approval of policy item 1B2B. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion or any questions on this matter? Seeing none, we will proceed to a vote. All those in favor, please indicate.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? This matter is approved. Policy item 1B2C is a resolution to establish policy 1.5, policy for awarding posthumous degrees. Again, I ask Provost Hensel to.
It is just point.
What?
You can just point at me. It's always a tragedy. It's always a tragedy when CUNY loses one of our students to an untimely death. When this occurs close to a student's graduation, it's important that we acknowledge and recognize the student's efforts and achievements for the benefit of their family, friends, and loved ones. In 2017, the University Office of Academic Affairs established an administrative policy that provides clear guidance with respect to the parameters and criteria for such posthumous degrees. In October 2023, Governor Kathy Hochul signed a law requiring CUNY and SUNY to establish board policies for the awarding of such degrees. To that end, the university would like to codify its current administrative policy as Policy 1.5 in the Manual of General Policy.
Thank you. I move the approval of policy item 1B2C. Do I have a second? There is a second. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, let us proceed to a vote. All those in favor, please indicate.
Aye.
Any opposed, please indicate. Any abstentions? This matter is approved. Policy item 1B2D is a resolution to establish a new policy 7.10 affecting reasonable accommodations and academic adjustments procedures relating to accommodations and accessibility for students. Again.
In April 2023, the City University of New York entered into a voluntary compliance agreement, or VCA, with the United States Department of Justice to establish policies and procedures to ensure student requests for accommodations and complaints are timely addressed and/or appropriately escalated to the attention of relevant higher-level administrators. The VCA requirements include the creation of university-wide policies that address the engagement of qualified learning assistants, the availability of accessible course materials, accessible instructional technology, and reasonable accommodation requests and complaint procedures. While multiple relevant procedures exist, the university has now developed a single comprehensive and combined policy for the board's consideration. The policy was drafted by a working group comprised of representatives from the Office of Academic Affairs, Computing and Information Services, the Office of Disability Services, and the Office of General Counsel. It was shared extensively with constituent groups and stakeholders for consultation and input before finalization.
Thank you. I move the approval of policy item 1B2D. Do I have a second? Thank you. Any discussion or any questions?
I have some
Yes,
questions.
please.
Hi, so some concerns from students for 2C does not give accommodation for any students who are on bed rest or homebound outside of the scope of pregnancy and childbirth other than related medical conditions, but there are other reasons such as surgery and other matters which are not related to pregnancy and childbirth. It also does not address if any instructor has a policy of dropping your lowest grade, then requiring a missed test or assignment to be dropped, and it presents an unfair disadvantage by removing opportunity for the student. Additionally, it does not state what the consequences for the disability service officers are if they do not provide proper accommodations. It said each CUNY college or unit has accessibility and disability service office with a director, but KBCC has recently assigned their directive counseling services to jointly serve as director of disability services. We're wondering if there should be a requirement for a dedicated individual to service this office rather than an individual who services multiple offices.
So I'll start by saying a policy is always a general statement of what is required, and the specifics of the law are clear. That pregnancy is one of many what quote-unquote disabilities that are covered by both the Voluntary Compliance Act but also the Americans with Disabilities Act. So to the extent that bed rest is a reasonable accommodation for any disability, that's encompassed within the policy. As it relates to sort of the specific questions of dropping specific grades, et cetera, the ADA is an individualized inquiry of what's necessary as it relates to a particular course. So in some cases, it's a fundamental alteration to grant an accommodation. In some cases, it would not be. So it has to be determined on an individualized basis. And the policy takes that into consideration and allows that process to go forward. So it would be impossible, in other words, to identify every possible accommodation or every consequence. So that is encompassed. And I should say the student senate was consulted as part of this process and did not raise those objections. The last part I think is really a broader one, which is a good one, which is are the procedures in the different offices structured in such a way as to ensure that we are executing in good faith on these policies. And the answer is we are actually working through all of those questions to ensure that there are multiple levels of appeal so that to the extent students feel that they are not being served well, there are more immediate ways to escalate that into a higher level of review. So I can say that it is a widespread commitment to do our absolute best for our students with disabilities, and all of those things that you've raised are actually part of this policy.
Anything further?
If I may.
Please,
Just
Council.
two things. First, I want to thank Evie Sensel and her team, Vice Chancellor Maybank too, worked very, very hard in sort of putting all these things together so that we can be in compliance with the VCA and also be responsive to our students' needs. So I want to sort of commend that for the record. We also have the blessing that the provost research as a legal scholar is in this area, so we also have the advantage of that added expertise as we go into our commitment with the students. But I mean, it's been a lot of work, and I want to commend that publicly.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Again, anything further? Seeing nothing, we will proceed to a vote. All those in favor, please indicate. All those opposed? Any abstentions? This matter is approved. Policy item 1B3A is a resolution to award immediate tenure to Brandon Jackson at John Jay College with an application of bylaw 6.2.b. Provost Hensel, will you present?
The City University of New York is part of a national and international community of scholars and customarily recognizes the judgment of colleagues at other institutions with respect to faculty personnel decisions and has an expectation of reciprocity. In order to attract renowned scholars in all disciplines to join the university faculty and advance their strategic agenda, there is an exception that tenure will be awarded upon appointment. Professor Brandon Jackson is a widely respected scholar in the area of Black sociological thought and was awarded tenure at Purdue University. My esteemed colleague, Provost Allison Pease from John Jay, is here to answer any questions you may have.
I move the approval of policy item 1B3A. Do I have a second?
Second.
Are there any questions or any discussion on this? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All in favor, please indicate.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? This matter is approved. Policy item 1B4A through 1B4G are resolutions to award early tenure to faculty at various campuses with an application of bylaw 6.2.c, paren 2, close paren, period.
To be precise.
Again,
The following candidates for early tenure have professional records that exceed expectations of faculty being considered for tenure and promotion, and the colleges are seeking approval to award them early tenure. From Baruch College, Ruth Beer, Department of Management. Arash Aspur Ramamabadi, my apologies if I said that wrong, Department of Management. Pablo Soberan Bravo, Department of Mathematics. From Medgar Evers College, Jalonia Dent, Department of Mathematics. From Queens College, Oded Mir, Department of Classical, Middle Eastern, and Asian Languages. Kevin Shi, Department of Economics. And Xinzheng Yao, Department of Media Studies. A number of college leaders have joined us today and can answer questions should you have any concerns.
thank you. I move the approval of policy items 1B4A through 1B4G. Do I have a second? Thank you. Are there any questions or any discussion for any of these candidates? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? These matters are approved. Thank you. Policy item 1B5 is a resolution requesting the approval of the Faculty Personnel Matters Report of the Educational Policy Committee. I ask Provost Ansel again.
The information contained in the Faculty Personnel Matters Report includes appointments and reappointments with tenure and fellowship leaves. Faculty are evaluated and reappointed on a systematic basis through a highly rigorous process involving local governance, as well as approval of the institution's chief academic officer and president, with the goal of awarding tenure to retain superior faculty. Fellowship leave is granted to faculty to conduct research, improve their teaching, or produce creative work as part of the nationally recognized responsibilities of the professoriate. Faculty Personnel Matters Report of the Education Policy Committee presented here today was generated in summary format from faculty data entered by the campuses into CUNY First, the university's system of record, between October 13th, 2023 and December 15th, 2023.
Thank you. I move the approval of policy item 1B5. Do I have a second? Thank you. Any questions or any discussion about the Faculty Personnel Matters Report? Seeing none. All those in favor, please indicate. All those opposed, please indicate. Any abstentions? This matter is approved. Policy item 1B6 is a resolution requesting approval of the actions in the Curriculum and Academic Policy Dashboard Report. Again, Provost Hensel, your last shot.
Okay. Routine academic matters, local academic policies, and course inclusions in the university's general education program are presented to the Committee on Education Policy in summary form via an online dashboard. The Curriculum and Academic Policy Dashboard makes it possible to explore the graphic representations and charts of the academic activity from the previous month and over time using various tools and filters. Highlights from this month's dashboard include the classification of 8 new general education courses among colleges, giving students more options to study the physical sciences, mathematics, and the humanities, 53 program actions, and 13 new or revised undergraduate policies.
I move the approval of policy item 1B6. Do I have a second? Any discussion or questions? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? This item is approved. With no more items on the agenda, first, thank the Provost's office for all the work they do in getting ready for these meetings. It is amazing. And I move to adjourn the meeting. Is there any opposition? Seeing none, we stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.